Welcome to the 5th annual CareerSource Suncoast State of the Talent Conference. I'm Jamie Kahns, Market Executive for Bank of America's Sarasota Manatee. I'm also a proud board member for CareerSource Suncoast. We hope everyone's staying well, and we thank you for joining the premier workforce conference, bringing inspiring content focused on the future of workforce and talent development. Yes, it's unfortunate. Here we are virtual again, and we hope to bring everyone back again soon. But we have to admit, there are some great things about the virtual environment, like bringing so many people together across the globe at one time, and having access to some pretty incredible speakers that you'll hear from today, as well as I'm sure there's still some of you out there joining in your comfy PJs. Now, this is Bank of America's 3rd year as the presenting sponsor for State of the Talent Conference, as the work they do is very important to us. We've enjoyed working with CareerSource to make a difference in our community and strengthen our workforce together. Today, we have attendees from a wide range, including small businesses, economic development corporations, chambers, community leaders, educational institutes, public, private, civic, and even charitable organizations. We welcome you all. We hope you enjoy this year's State of the Talent Conference. If you joined the virtual conference last year, you'll note we have a different format this year. More speakers, quicker flow, short bursts of content from industry experts around the globe. The theme this year is Consider This, as we plan to inspire, educate, and entertain you with content and ideas that you might consider as you manage your teammates, departments, or businesses. A successful workforce and human capital management strategy is critical, and we hope this conference gives you some insights and inspires ideas to help your organization thrive. We hope you enjoy, and we'll be back to welcome you again after our lunch break. Please come see us at our sponsor booth during the break. Now, enjoy the first half of the program and consider this.
Consider this!
When I grow up, I want to file all day.
I want to claw my way up to middle management.
Be replaced on a whim.
I want to have a brown nose.
I want to be a yes man.
Yes woman.
Yes, sir. Coming, sir.
Anything for a raise, sir.
When I grow up,
I want to be underappreciated.
Be paid less for doing the same job.
I want to be forced into early retirement.
If you lead a team, you already know how important it is to attract and retain great talent. And when we get those superstar employees, the last thing we want is for them to quit. So why do employees quit? The go-to answer, the easy answer for most managers, is that they're leaving for money. In fact, I was just reading an article on Forbes that said about 89% of managers believe that their team members leave because they're taking a position that's going to pay them more. But that's actually not the case. In fact, only about 12% of employees say that they left their role simply because of more money. People are leaving because they don't like their bosses. They don't like the leader that they work for. They are probably in a toxic environment and they don't enjoy working for that person. And that's a problem, right? And so in that same article, it said about 89% of employees cited that they were leaving a position due to lack of appreciation. Lack of appreciation. So what does that mean? That means as a manager, as a leader, we need to become incredible coaches. Incredible coaches, because what great coaches do is they help their people grow. And that means that they're not just focusing on the things, those areas that they need improvement on, the things that they're not doing so well. We also get to show appreciation and let them know when they've done something great, when they're doing great work. People want to feel appreciated. They want to feel like they're contributing, like they're making a difference in the organization, that their work matters, that they matter in the organization. And that's what we get to do as a coach. And so if you lead a team, when you're coaching your people, are you letting them know when they're doing great work? And some people say, well, I don't have time for all that. I don't have time to do all that. It's little things, sending them an email, popping into their office and letting them know, making sure that the next time you have a sit down or one-on-one, you're letting them know. And you're not just saying great job or great work, you're letting them know specifically what you appreciated about the work that they did. Maybe they had a really great strategy. Maybe they just communicated the project to the rest of the team and were able to collaborate with everyone really effectively. So what about their work did you appreciate? That's going to lift them up. That's going to inspire them to continue to do great work. It's also going to help them with their self-esteem, to build them up, to make sure that you're helping them grow, to help them become a better leader. That's what we need to be doing as managers. So make sure that when you are coaching your team, you're letting them know about that great work that they're doing. Appreciate your people, because the last thing we want is for our great team members, for those superstar employees to leave our team simply because we weren't letting them know that their work is good. We weren't appreciating what they were contributing to the organization. What is one thing you can do today to make sure that your team members know that you appreciate them?
A lot of employers have questions with respect to what they can do when employees go on employer review websites such as Glassdoor and post negative reviews. The answer depends on the type of review that is given. Generally, employees are allowed to give their opinions, especially as it relates to the terms and conditions of their employment. And there really isn't a lot that an employer can do after the fact to get that removed. However, if an employee goes on to a social media website such as Glassdoor and posts something that is absolutely 100% false and is a false statement of fact, there may be a defamation type claim available to the employer against the employee. Keep in mind, however, that most employees are not going to have money to pay damages or fees. One thing that we recommend to our clients is to utilize the processes that are available through the website itself. Often you can find reporting mechanisms and processes in place where you can challenge certain statements that are made on the website. These can often be very helpful for employers to get bad statements about their business removed. Generally, employers do not have the ability to force Glassdoor or any similar website to take down certain posts. They are not the individuals that put the content out into the world. They're just the platform. And because of that, it limits what type of remedy is currently available. There is one thing that employers should consider, and that is putting agreements in place on the front end while the individual is still employed and still happy to prevent that type of communication. Number one, you could have non-disclosure agreements to prohibit employees from going online and making statements revealing confidential information. If they do that and have a non-disclosure agreement, the employer then has another means by which to force the employee to remove that content. Moreover, there are certain situations where non-disparagement covenants can come into play, where parties agree not to discuss things about the other that are negative. As with non-disclosure agreements, a non-disparagement agreement is also a tool that employers can use to A, establish what is appropriate communication post and during employment, as well as a tool to try to enforce against an employee who violates it by posting on a website such as Glassdoor. Other questions that come up in the employment context, and they came to fruition a lot during the last presidential election, is free speech in the workplace. In and of itself, every time I hear that, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Because if you take a look at the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law. A private employer is not Congress. Now, there are prohibitions on limiting speech in the workplace, but they're not the First Amendment. You can find such prohibitions in the National Labor Relations Act, where employees are provided the right to be able to discuss the terms and conditions of their employment with other employees. You find these type of prohibitions in the different civil rights statutes that provide protection to employees so that they are able to bring concerns with respect to how they're being treated in the workplace to someone there. These are the types of laws that apply to speech within the workplace. And again, I just want to finish off by saying the First Amendment really has no place in the workplace if we're talking about a private employer. I'm going to finish off by just saying the analysis is slightly different when someone works for a governmental employer, because that is indeed the government and there are additional considerations.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the State of the Talent Conference. My name is Greg Smogard. Before I get started, I'd like to take a moment and thank CareerSource Suncoast for this opportunity to be here today. I'm joining you from our beautiful Sarasota Manatee campus, where we provide our students with key skills for the current and future workforce. Over the next few minutes, we'll be discussing another area of focus on our campus, which is critical and creative design thinking. Personally, I realized how significant critical thinking was primarily because of my business background working with corporations, startups, and consulting. Many years ago, it became apparent to me that critical thinking was a key indicator for many of the most successful and innovative businesses and organizations. It's really what guides you to evaluate situations, navigate through challenges, look at various perspectives, and develop well thought out solutions. I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, but first, joining me today is my colleague, Dr. Helene Robinson.
Thank you, Greg. Nice to be with you. I want to quickly share why critical thinking has become so important to me. As a young child, my parents impressed upon me how important it was to question what we were being told. In 1977, my father moved us to Memphis from California to help develop inclusive churches and take a stand against personal and systemic racism. He taught me how to think critically. Early in my career, I was teaching children who struggled with some mental health challenges. I used critical thinking skills to identify the function of their challenging behaviors and then designed effective intervention plans to lead to their success in school and life. Our life experiences shape our views, and I was so fortunate to be taught critical thinking skills at an early age and have it become part of my career. However, not all of us are taught these skills at an early age, and that's why we have integrated them into our curriculum at USF, and why we also create custom workshops for employers in the community. So that brings me to you, Greg. What's your experience with critical and creative design thinking in the workplace?
When I speak with businesses, both locally, nationally, and internationally, regarding what higher education can do to help provide employers with the skills they require, both now and for the future, the conversation frequently turns to soft skills and then quickly to critical thinking. As you can see by the chart, critical thinking and problem solving have and continue to top the charts for the most required skills listed by employers. Over the last several years, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, in their annual jobs outlook, has consistently ranked critical thinking and complex problem solving at the top of their list. This is not just a U.S. phenomenon, however. The World Economic Forum, in their Futures of Job Report 2020, identifies critical thinking and analysis as key skills that will grow in importance. That is why last year, the USF Sarasota Manatee campus launched a series of workshops for the public to introduce these concepts to companies, organizations, and individuals. Perhaps some of you attended. Our goal is to develop critical thinking training workshops for you, tailored specifically to address challenges faced by your company or organization. One of the biggest issues I see when discussing critical thinking and creative design is that these terms are loosely defined and frequently used. Helene is going to help us understand how to define and apply these concepts.
Paul and Elder define critical thinking as the art of analyzing and evaluating thinking with a view to improve it. We use their habits of a well-cultivated critical thinker to define 5 learning outcomes. We teach and assess toward these outcomes across a wide variety of courses in an effort to develop generalizable critical thinking skills. These are addressed through discipline-specific rubrics aligned to our 5 critical thinking outcomes. It is interdisciplinary, cutting across colleges and majors, which increases the transfer of learning into novel contexts, such as employment and graduate school. By providing opportunities to synthesize multidisciplinary backgrounds, the model facilitates creativity and drives innovation. Our 5 critical thinking outcomes are: formulate vital questions and problems clearly, gather and assess relevant information, identify relevant assumptions, alternatives, and implications, develop well-reasoned conclusions and solutions, communicate reasoning effectively. Our program is currently being revised to include the creative design thinking process as an enhancement to our critical thinking outcomes. Phases of the creative design process naturally integrate with our critical thinking outcomes. To fully engage in the creative design process, one must use critical thinking skills. For example, to design an effective solution or product, one develops empathy by examining and perceiving their users and their environments, learning their values, emotions, and needs. Reflecting on this insight helps to define an actionable problem statement that facilitates ideation where large quantities and broad diversity of ideas are explored, experimented with, and developed. This leads to creating multiple prototypes in a physical form, and when shared in an interactive process, facilitates imagination, exploration, reflection, and revision. Finally, the test mode is when the designer shares the prototype product or solution in the context of the user's life, which leads to reflection, assessment, and revision that inspires future iterations. Greg, how can company leaders integrate this kind of thinking into their workforce?
Well, first, I think it's relatively easy for a leader or a manager to say that I would like my colleagues or employees to think more critically. However, it is much more difficult to put that plan into action. It's important for leaders to be very clear about what they want to accomplish with critical thinking. During my business career, one common issue I frequently ran into was when a leader or management team did not clearly communicate their objectives throughout the organization. And I want to highlight the word throughout. Even with a team that is thinking critically, without clear objectives, your team may become less focused and less effective. You can apply critical and creative design thinking both strategically and tactically. Strategic decisions include developing a creative, innovative culture or responding to a major change to your business, like a pandemic or a competitive threat. Utilizing a critical thinking process can be very beneficial in these situations. You can also use it tactically, where you can help a number of areas including new business products, process improvement opportunities, acquiring or retaining customers, or developing a new competitive advantage. In my experience, critical thinking can be especially effective in identifying and applying process improvement opportunities. However, this requires seeking feedback from and collaborating with a broad group of your employees and customer base. So when you are beginning to introduce and apply critical thinking and creative design thinking to your organization, set clear objectives by formulating concise questions, as Helene mentioned. Focus on the root cause of your problem or opportunity and clearly communicate your objectives to your team. Helene, why is this important now, and how can this be transformative to the workplace?
Well, first, it increases self-awareness and social awareness, which counteract our natural tendency for egocentric and sociocentric thinking. Critical thinking helps us to become more self-aware and effectively engage in conversations filled with differences and disagreements. It can help us recognize the limitations of our own point of view and hidden biases, appreciate the point of view of others, and create innovative solutions to cross-cultural challenges. Mindfully practicing critical and creative design thinking can help build collaborative, caring, and courageous cultures where tough conversations can occur and people still feel empowered to take smart risks and innovate. It also increases resiliency. Engaging in the creative design process helps people to reframe failure and risk-taking as a positive feature and essential phase because it inspires us to imagine other options and explore alternatives. It can facilitate healthy striving and a growth mindset as compared to perfectionism and fear. Liedtke stated in the Harvard Business Review, design thinking processes counteract human biases that thwart creativity while addressing the challenges typically faced in reaching superior solutions, lowered cost and risk, and employee buy-in. Design thinking emphasizes engagement, dialogue, and learning, garners a broad commitment to change, and helps innovators collaborate and agree on what is essential to the outcome at every phase. It does this not only by overcoming workplace politics, but by shaping the experiences of the innovators and of their key stakeholders and implementers at every step. So Greg, Liedtke stated that design thinking works because it addresses the biases in decision-making that hamper innovation. Can you offer some practical strategies in how to deal with bias when applying critical thinking in decision-making and leadership?
That's a big question. Let me approach it this way. We are all human. We have all developed various biases that can impact our decision-making. The issue of bias in decision-making and leadership can be a significant factor in applying critical and creative design thinking. Sometimes as leaders, as I've stated before, we may not address the source or the root cause of the problem. Or we can tend to take the easiest, the quickest, least expensive path to address a situation or an opportunity. What happens? The problem comes back. We may limit our feedback to only our direct reports or to the same group we're always working with. Or something else we do a lot is that we have a statement we use, we've always done it this way before and it's worked out so far, so why do we need to change? These approaches can become big barriers to your decision making. Ways you can minimize bias or barriers to critical thinking are first, to understand that some problems are much more complex than you realize. So listen carefully to all stakeholders and keep an open mind. I want to repeat, keep an open mind. This sounds easy, but many leaders continue to have a difficult time with this basic concept. Also, expand your circle of feedback to include a much wider pool of input and ideas from your team. And finally, encourage and reward your team as they transition to a much more dynamic, creative, and innovative culture. Helene, is there anything else the audience should know?
Here are some action steps. Build empathy. It is the foundation of any creative design and so essential so it aligns to the values and needs of your employees. Create a culture that encourages healthy striving through engagement and reflection with the iterative phases of the creative design process. Develop a structured, critical thinking framework that can be applied across context and disciplines, and empower people to contextualize the critical thinking outcomes within their own domain. Develop and align rubrics to your framework that can be applied across context. Implement and engage in reflection to revise based on new insights. Our objective is to help businesses use critical thinking in their day-to-day operations. The difficulty is in knowing how, and we would like to help you with that.
So if you'd like to explore implementing critical thinking and creative design processes in your organization, we'd love to work with you. Please get in touch, and thank you all for your time.
Hi, my name is Spencer Niles, and it's my privilege to be with you to talk at the State of the Talent Conference 2021 about what I think is something very important for us to consider. So consider this. What do you think is the most important element of satisfaction, of success, either one or both, for your employees' career development? You might think about, well, their talents have to align with the tasks they have to perform. You might say that they work well with others. You might say that their values connect with the company's values. There's a long list that you could come up with, and all those kinds of things are certainly important. But I think there's an ingredient for an employee's success, for an employee's satisfaction, that trumps all of those that we've already mentioned. And that is the employee's sense of hope for themselves and for their future. Now, immediately when I say hope, many of you probably start to think about sort of hope that connects with wishful thinking. Well, I hope it turns out okay in the end. That sort of hope. That's not what I mean. I mean hope that's connected to action, hope that's connected to goals, that's connected to strategies towards achieving those goals, hope that's connected to having confidence, what psychologists refer to as self-efficacy, hope that's connected to motivation. That is, I'm motivated to take the steps I need to take to achieve the goals that are important to me to achieve. When these align, the sort of the what are you focused on, the how will you get there, confidence, the question of can I do it, the motivation, will I do it? When those align and they're all affirmative, then it's essentially guaranteed you're going to have a hopeful worker. And before you dismiss hope as not relevant or not that important, let me just highlight the fact that hope, action hope, as I'm talking about it right now, has been connected to a wide range of very important behavioral outcomes related to work, related to health recovery, related to sports performance, on and on. And so the abundant research that now exists related to the relevance of action-oriented hope for important outcomes is now, it's overwhelming. So there's little dispute about the importance of hope. And that said, it's then, to me, consider this, somewhat mystifying that we rarely talk about it in any sort of explicit way. And we rarely utilize strategies to help workers create and sustain a sense of hope in their work. But there are things that you can do, and I've already started to talk about them. A lot of the work as it relates to action-oriented hope started with a psychologist by the name of Rick Snyder. And together with my research team, researchers from the University of British Columbia in Canada, at Penn State, we've been focused on developing something called hope action theory for about the last 12 to 15 years. We have a number of research studies working with long-term unemployed workers, working with Syrian refugees, working with recent immigrants, working with those who have difficult challenges in living that they're trying to overcome to become better employees. So people dealing with addiction, for instance, hope is particularly relevant for them as an example. So we've created this theory, hope action theory, which is really not an academic theory at all. It's a theory oriented towards practice. My colleagues and I have been focused on the importance of intervening in people's careers and ways to help them become all that they can be in their careers. And we do this by focusing on a set of what we might call meta competencies that are particularly important for people to engage in. And once they learn these meta competencies, our research has shown that they are in fact more hopeful workers, more productive workers, and more satisfied workers. And you know that translates into better outcomes all around in terms of retention and in terms of productivity. So what is this model that I'm referring to? What's it look like? So you have a slide of that model, and you'll see that it contains important steps, such as self-reflection. What do I mean by that? I mean, engaging in intentional time to consider what your experiences have to teach you, about your strengths, about your growth edges, about the fit in your current situation, about the direction you might head towards. We each have countless numbers of learning experiences each and every day. The problem is we've become so busy. There was a writer by the name of Thomas Merton who once said, busyness is an offense to the soul. And I think most of us end up offending our souls each and every day because we don't take the time to learn from our experience. And the less time we take relative to learning from our experiences, the more we find ourselves in a situation that absolutely makes no sense to us. We wonder how we got there. We become frustrated. We become burned out. We become dissatisfied. Self-reflection, paying attention to what your experiences have to teach you about you and your situation, is critically important for managing your career effectively. Because not only does it give you a sort of check-in assessment of what you're learning and what you're experiencing and what it means for you, but it also then helps you to develop self-clarity. And self-clarity, that sense of, I understand who I am, I understand what's important to me, I understand where I need to be, what environments make the most sense for me, given my skill sets, my values, my interests, my intentions, my goals and aspirations. Then once you have that clarity, grounded in self-reflection, then you can create a vision for your future that you get excited about. Visioning is focused on possibility thinking. Too often we stay stuck in probability thinking. But possibility thinking is where the action is. I guarantee you. Possibility thinking is what revs us up. Possibility thinking is what energizes us. Possibility thinking is where our passion resides. So if you engage in regular self-reflection, what are my experiences teaching me about me? And then use those, get answers to those questions. Self-reflection is often focused on the questions related to your experience. Self-clarity is often focused on getting the answers. And then once you have that clarity and you engage in visioning, where does my energy lead me in terms of what I now know to be true about me based upon my experiences that I'm having each and every day? What's a future vision that excites me, a goal, if you will, that I hope to achieve? Once you have some clarity about that, then you simply begin this process of goal setting and planning related to the vision that you've created, which emerges from your self-clarity that's grounded in self-reflection and which you have participated in, committed to, engaged in. And then once you have the goals and the plan set, then it's simply a matter of taking action. Now I'll say to you, having done this work for about 35 years, I will say to you that it's often when it's time to take action that people step back. They imagine that if I take action, and often I think of it this way, and I fail, then catastrophic things might occur. That what I had hoped for, isn't going to happen, and that would be awful. Yet, if you reframe thinking from success or failure, something that we've been taught for a long time to focus on, but rather focus on learning, focus on what I'm going to learn as a result of the action I've taken, right? Now, it's not a risk of succeeding or failing. It's a step towards learning. And then if I'm adapting, if I'm being adaptable, one of the most important skills, survey after survey indicates, of employers, indicates that being able to be adaptable is one of the most important skills to possess in the 21st century. Adaptable means being able to use the information you get from the experiences you've had and translate that information, right, into a direction, into an understanding of what you are strong at, where your growth edges are, what you need to do to keep moving forward in your work so that you're a productive and valued worker. Right? That's adapting. It's critically important. And when you adapt and ask the questions about, what am I learning as a result of having done what I did? Then you're right back into self-reflection, aren't you? And then you just keep going around. And this is a set of skills that you can develop. And like muscles, when you go to work out in the gym, and today I'm going to focus on legs or upper body or arms or whatever it might be, as you develop each component of the hope action theory and become stronger and stronger at using these components to guide you in your career self-management, right? As workers begin to do that, they then take greater responsibility for their own career development. Now, coaching along the way can be helpful. To translate self-reflection into self-clarity, a coach can be useful. In creating a vision for the future, a coach can be useful. In identifying goals and plans for the future, a coach can be useful. In implementing and taking action, a coach can be useful. And adapting to your experience and processing what you've learned, a coach can be useful. So there's a role here to be played. But what we have found is that the more workers practice these skill sets, the more adept they become at managing it on their own. Maybe once in a while checking in, but then they stay vital in their careers. Because once a worker becomes burned out, once a worker finds themselves in the place where it makes no sense for them to be in their work, that's a downward slide. That now you've got essentially a problem employee. So engaging in these kinds of behaviors can help a worker avoid getting in that situation, right? And because they're constantly learning from their experiences and then using the learning to inform them in terms of who they are and who they're becoming. I work in my career, I've worked with the leading, a person that many people regard as the leading vocational psychology in the history of vocational psychology. I was on his research team. My focus was on translating his theory to practice. His name was Donald Super. And he had a phrase that he used, that the self-concept evolves over time, making choice and adjustment continuous processes. So what we're saying in this model is you got to be sensitive to that. You got to pay attention and be sensitive to how you're evolving as a worker. But not only that, and we've certainly seen this during the pandemic, that not only does the self-concept evolve over time, the world of work evolves over time, making choosing and adjusting continuous requirements. It's a constant interaction with our environment. That's why environment is on the outer edges of the figure of hope action theory, because we're constantly having this interactive relationship with our environment. And that informs us in terms of who we are becoming, who we need to become, and how our environment is shaping us and how we can shape our environment. Now, there's a little sort of case study there, because we've translated these steps I've just reviewed with you into an inventory called the Hope Action Inventory. It's now been translated into about 8 different languages around the world and is used in a variety of settings to help workers manage their careers more effectively. And the case study is one of a worker by the name of Greg, a 36-year-old who's unemployed, who's taken the Hope Action Inventory. And there you see his scores from the Hope Action Inventory. And as you look at his scores, you see right away that Greg is on the low side when it comes to a sense of hope, engaging in self-reflection, and having self-clarity. That he struggles with that. And so it's no wonder that he lacks hope, because he's in a state of confusion. And often when I've worked with employees who are struggling in their careers, I view it as a crisis of imagination, that they can't see what they can be. This inventory is embedded in something called Hope Central. That is from a company called Kuder. And their theme is, in fact, that we help workers see what they can be. And I think that's exactly Craig's problem, is that because he doesn't engage in self-reflection, because he doesn't take the time to pay attention to what his experiences have to tell him about who he is, that now he's probably feeling more confusion than anything else, and certainly has very low level of self-clarity. So you can begin work with Craig. Without the Hope Action Inventory, you likely would miss this by saying it's important to engage in self-reflection. So self-reflection looks at things like mindfulness, journaling, meditation, yoga, mindful exercise of any kind, any activity that allows you to slow down and sort of step out of that rapid current of information that's constantly coming at all of us each and every day, so that we don't offend our souls, so that we can learn from our experiences, right? And then use that learning to inform us so that we're a wiser, a more aware career decision maker, so that we're an employee that's engaging in work that they're good at, that they find meaningful and purposeful. And so as Craig would be guided to engage in activities, to slow down, pay attention, maybe journal, talk about his experiences, what he's learning each and every day, and make sure it's focused on learning, not succeeding or failing, but learning. All right. Then, and he would be one that would value interaction with a coach, that then he could begin to translate that activity into self-clarity. As he begins to see what he could be, then his hope would, I predict, begin to increase. And then as it matters, he builds that momentum to guide him in visioning for the future, right? And to look at opportunities within your organization that would maximize what he has to bring, what he has to contribute, so that he's a productive worker. As he continues to evolve, it's a fact of human development, folks, that you evolve over time. Nobody stays the same. That as you evolve, you pay attention to how you're evolving. You use that as the world of work continues to evolve. You pay attention to how you're interacting with that change, right? So that you can maximize your opportunities, maximize your contributions, and be the best worker you can be for as long as you can be, as you create and sustain a sense of hope for what it is you have to offer in the workplace. Thank you.
Consider this. Employers often focus on training their low-level staff and their highest managers and forget to provide training to middle-level managers. And that can be a mistake. In most instances, your middle-level managers, those that have the direct day-to-day contact with the employees, are the ones that are your boots on the ground. They're your protection from lawsuits. Training those employees is incredibly important in order to make sure that they are able to see when there are issues that have to be brought to HR. Because if they do not recognize those issues, then sometimes very important facts and circumstances get ignored, which can eventually lead to legal liability. In addition to that, it is very important for employers to make sure that then when they are reviewing their middle-level managers, they also review that manager's ability to recognize when there are issues at play. And I'll give you an example. So if you have an employee that is gone for 3 days due to a health-related situation, that is something that could implicate the Family Medical Leave Act with employers that have 50 or more employees. If that middle-level manager doesn't know the basics as it relates to the Family Medical Leave Act, they might not bring it to the attention of HR. And the consequence of that is that certain notices aren't put in place, and time away from the office by that employee may not fall under the purview of the Family Medical Leave Act. Earlier today, we made reference to the civil rights statutes and how they apply at hiring and firing. It is important to keep in mind that these statutes apply all through an individual's employment. Employers and businesses must make sure that they are treating individuals equally, especially when it comes to important decisions, whether it be promotion decisions or, in some cases, even decisions on who is granted certain training. This does not mean that every training issue is one that a civil rights lawsuit can address. However, it is important to note that there are claims called disparate impact claims. And that means that if there is a policy of an employer that disparately impacts a group of people, there is a potential suit because of that. This was seen a few years ago with Google, who was sued because they generally were putting female employees in one track and male employees in another. And although both female and male employees were being hired, the track that the females were assigned to was a track that didn't provide as much opportunity for training and advancement. Therefore, it is important for businesses to consider what they're doing and who they're assigning to training and what the basis is. If there are stereotypes that are leading decisions with respect to who obtains training, then employers may find themselves in the midst of a suit challenging those actions. Other questions that arise when it comes to training is whether or not there can be claims against employers for not providing proper training or for providing bad trainers. The general answer is no. And that is because generally the civil rights statutes only apply if decisions are being made based on an individual's protected class. If it just so happens that an individual is randomly assigned to a poor trainer and therefore doesn't learn as well as others and therefore doesn't perform as well as others and ultimately ends up being terminated, well, that's just bad luck. However, if an employer regularly assigns a certain group of people to a trainer that it knows is not effective, and all of those individuals are members of a protected class, there may actually be a claim. It is important that no matter what aspect of the employment relationship, that businesses should make sure that their decisions are being made based on legitimate reasons and not reasons that are tied to anyone's protected characteristic.
Hi, my name is Shannon Tipton, and I am the owner of Learning Rebels, and I am so honored to be here in front of you at the State of Talent Conference in 2021. And my job today is to ask you to consider learning in a very different way. So I'm going to ask you to consider this. Consider thinking differently about learning. Consider thinking about learning as learning imitating life, and thinking about how micro-learning can then impact our learning structures today. So let me start off by asking you a couple of questions. What if training helped people do what they needed to do smarter, better, faster? What if people had access to expertise and access to knowledge at the tip of their fingers? What if the focus shifted from just-in-case learning to just-in-time learning, and that we gave people information when they needed it? What if the business saw learning and development as what it is, problem solvers, a department that helps business improve efficiencies, as a department that helps people not only get unstuck, but to help them and help their businesses be better than they were yesterday? What if we focused on solving one problem at a time, taking one key idea and making that the key priority in order to do that one thing better? What if we considered disruption as our go-to method of learning rather than the classroom? Why must we look at learning differently? Why is this important? Well, 80% of CEOs believe that upskilling is the most pressing challenge that they face today. That is second to collaboration and creativity within the workplace. Now, when we take a look at that piece of information and then take a report that was published by Burns and by Deloitte, that tells us that only 1% of our work week is dedicated to professional growth and development. That is only 24 minutes a week. And when we put on top of that 2 out of 3 workers actually complain that they don't have time to do their real jobs, what does that mean for creativity, innovation, upskilling, etc.? Well, that 24 minutes becomes null. So this means we have to fit our learning within that 24-minute time frame. This becomes hard, right? This means that we need to reinvent how we put learning in front of people today. So I would ask you to consider companies like Uber, Netflix, Tesla, YouTube, Airbnb. They all have changed their business model from when they first started to now. Uber used to be that car service we called Dept to take us to the airport and then bring us home. Now you can get food from Uber, right? So Uber Eats. So they are evolving. Netflix has evolved from that one man who was so angry that he was getting late fees from Blockbuster that he decided to start his own company. And now Netflix is a major content provider. What does this mean for learning? Well, this means then that we need to look at problems in a whole different way. And this is where micro learning and what we refer to as learning in the workflow becomes relevant. Micro learning meaning small burst of knowledge delivered to people when they need to have it. And when they need to have it is within the flow of work. So not sending people to classrooms, not placing them in front of computers to take ineffective e-learning programs. It means letting them decide when they need to have the learning at the moment of need. So giving people the ability to take that learning and impact work and impact their performance within the context of the job. So I'm not saying that we've got to throw out the baby with bathwater. I'm not saying that we need to explode our learning and development departments and disregard our leadership development programs or sales programs or onboarding programs. What I am asking you to consider is to consider how we put these programs in front of people so that way they are impactful, that they reflect life. When we go through life, when we want to know something, we go to the Google machine and we Google something and we find out what it is we need to know. We do the thing and then we move on. We're not waiting for our learning management systems to drop a piece of learning in front of us. Nobody is waiting for that. So this is why we need to consider learning in an entirely different paradigm, looking at it in a whole different way. But first, what's the difference? So what's the difference then between training and workflow learning or micro learning? When we consider formalized training, what we consider that is classroom training, right? We've got people sitting in rows of desks or tables with a experienced instructor in front of them, imparting all of their wisdom and knowledge. And that takes place over the course of several hours or the course of several days. And the problem is that becomes really ineffective. What that means is we need to think about how we provide that knowledge differently and bring that knowledge to people while they're working, rather than taking people away from their jobs. And when we take people away from their jobs, they become less efficient and less productive. What we want to do is we want to take the learning, put it into the workflow so that they can collaborate with their peers, they can share their work with other colleagues, that their learning becomes unscheduled, that they are gaining immediate knowledge, maybe not immediate mastery, but maybe mastery isn't what we need. Maybe people just want to be able to turn the widget better. Maybe they want to do something smarter. Maybe they want to do something faster. So this means then it's not in the classroom, it's in the course of their day. This means to reconsider that many courses simply are just a checklist screaming to get out. Many courses could be handled with a decision tree, a step action chart, an infographic, a 3-minute video. So reconsider some of your more bulkier learning and putting those into micro learning elements, which then encourage curiosity. Making curiosity a practice, embracing putting knowledge into the hands of your people rather than trying to keep ownership within a training department. It means challenging what we think we know about adult learning principles and about how people want to receive information today. What this means is to encourage people to ask questions, to dig deeper. This means taking the learning out of the four walls of the training department and asking people what they need. What if we did this? Or what if we tried that? What would happen if we blew up the leadership development program and really instead looked at it from an entirely different direction? What if? Right? We're asking you to consider looking at learning in a completely different way, that we look at it as a way to apply the need. Where when people need resources, we give them job aids and checklists and process maps. When people need to know something that is more contextual, that we give them short videos, we give them screencasts, we give them recorded webinars. When people need to collaborate, we give them the ability to access wikis or blogs or social networks or group chats, such as Slack or Teams or WhatsApp. So what we've done here, when we take those components, we put them into the workflow where people don't have to leave their desks in order to learn something, right? So what this does is this builds up the level of knowledge that people have. Why? Because they can access information right now. This becomes a completely different way of thinking. So rather than thinking about learning as something that happens to people, it really should be learning that happens for people, and for people to be able to grab the information when they need to have it. It means making it more interactive. It means building an experience for your employees and for the people who need that learning. That means creating infographics that are interactive. It means perhaps delivering learning lessons via text message. It means delivering content knowledge through email. All of those little ways of delivering information is mimicking life, because we all are never far from our phones. So if I can deliver a text message with a lesson, or a text message with a piece of information, or if I can text message a help center and that help center text messages me back the information I need automatically through a chatbot, now we're getting somewhere. Now we are daring to consider learning in a completely different way. So what does this mean? This means intervention. That means reverse engineering how you look about training. It means building from employee demand. It means building for the business. It means building for people rather than process. It means putting the humans first. So consider being sure that your technology supports curiosity, that it's easy to use, that it's easy to access. It means giving people the tools to collaborate and to share. It means creating more interesting and smaller pieces of content to be delivered to people. It means making learning as easy as life. Because what I would ask you to consider at this point is that learning is not a destination, it's a journey. It's a journey with many places to stop, many places to gather information, and to keep moving along the path. So, our job at this point is to focus more on helping to clear the pathway of barriers. It means helping people navigate that path and giving them those small bits of learning along the way. So, hopefully, I've given you a lot to consider and to keep in mind that microlearning is a way to give information to people when they need it, when the business needs them to have it. So, thank you very much for your time today. Again, my name is Shannon Tipton, owner of Learning Rebels, and I thank you for having me here today. I look forward to hearing from you soon. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and my website, learningrebels.com. Thank you, and I'll see you again soon.